The laughter hit Caleb Turner harder than any drought ever had. It erupted from every corner of the county fairgrounds. Some people covered their mouths. Others didn't bother. They laughed openly. Caleb stood frozen behind his small display table, his hands clenched around a stack of papers that represented 3 years of work. Across from him stood Jessica Reed, the richest girl in town, the daughter of billionaire agricultural businessman Richard Reed. And at that moment, she was enjoying every second of his humiliation. "Come on," Jessica said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You can't seriously think anyone is going to invest in this." She picked up one of his brochures and waved it in the air. "A revolutionary irrigation system," she read mockingly. Several people chuckled. Caleb swallowed hard. "It's designed to help small farms reduce water waste." Jessica laughed. "Small farms? Like yours?" More laughter. The crowd was growing. People love drama, especially when it involves someone at the bottom of the social ladder. Caleb kept his voice calm. "It works." "Oh, I'm sure it does." Jessica glanced at his worn boots, then at his faded shirt, then back at the display. "Tell me something." She crossed her arms. "If this invention is so amazing, why are you still broke?" The crowd exploded. Caleb felt heat rise into his face. His father had always taught him never to respond in anger, but right now it was difficult. Very difficult. Jessica leaned closer. "Maybe you should stop pretending you're some kind of entrepreneur." The crowd laughed again. "You'll always be a farm boy, Caleb." The words landed like a punch. For a moment, complete silence filled his mind. Then he slowly packed his papers. Jessica smirked. "That's what I thought." Caleb looked at her, not with anger, not with hatred, just disappointment. One sentence left his mouth. "One day, people will learn not to judge others by what they have." Jessica rolled her eyes. "And one day pigs will fly." The crowd laughed one final time. Caleb walked away, alone, humiliated. But what nobody knew was that 7 days later, Jessica Reed would be standing outside his office begging for help. And if you're enjoying the story so far, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're watching from. Stories like this take a lot of work to create, and your support helps us bring you more powerful stories every week. Caleb drove home in silence. The family farm stretched across acres of struggling land. The fields weren't what they used to be. Years of drought and rising costs had nearly destroyed everything. His father had spent his entire life fighting to keep the farm alive. Then cancer had taken him. Now Caleb carried the burden alone. His mother sat on the porch when he arrived. She immediately noticed his expression. "Tough day?" Caleb forced a smile. "I've had worse." She didn't believe him. "MHM." He sat beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "Jessica again?" Caleb nodded. His mother sighed. Some people confuse money with character. Caleb stared toward the fields. Maybe she's right. His mother turned sharply. "Don't say that." "I'm 24 years old." "Yes." "I'm broke." "Yes." "I can't even convince people to look at my project." His mother smiled gently. "Your father spent 10 years building this farm." Caleb looked at her. She continued. "People called him crazy too. That made him laugh. A little. Just enough." Later that night, Caleb walked into the barn where his prototype system was installed. Pipes, sensors, control units, thousands of hours of work, everything he had. He stared at it. Part of him wanted to quit. Part of him wanted to tear it apart. Jessica's words echoed in his head. "You'll always be a farm boy." His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Then he answered. "Hello, is this Caleb Turner?" "Yes." "My name is Daniel Brooks. I represent AgriFuture Technologies." Caleb frowned. He recognized the company immediately, one of the largest agricultural corporations in the country. His heart began racing. "Okay," Daniel continued. "I heard about your irrigation system." Caleb sat upright. "From who?" "A professor who attended the fair." Silence. "We'd like to see it." Caleb blinked. "What?" "We'd like a demonstration." His pulse accelerated. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Then finally, when tomorrow, the call ended. Caleb stood motionless. Tomorrow, a major corporation was coming to see his invention. For the first time in years, hope appeared. The next morning, 3 black SUVs rolled onto the property. His mother nearly dropped her coffee. 5 executives stepped out. Expensive suits, professional smiles, serious expressions. Daniel Brooks approached first. Caleb, Mr. Brooks. Daniel shook his hand. We've heard impressive things. Caleb nodded nervously. Thank you for coming. The demonstration lasted 2 hours. Caleb explained every feature, every improvement, every result. The executives asked questions, lots of questions, hard questions. By the end, nobody was smiling anymore. They looked stunned. One executive whispered to another. Another began taking notes. A third immediately made a phone call. Daniel finally looked at Caleb. When did you build this? 3 years ago. Daniel shook his head. Incredible. The word hit Caleb harder than Jessica's insults ever had, because for the first time, someone important believed him. The executives left, but not before scheduling another meeting. Then another. Then another. Within 48 hours, lawyers became involved. Investors started calling. Emails flooded his inbox. The momentum became impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, across town, Jessica sat inside her father's luxury office, scrolling through social media. Then she stopped. Her eyes narrowed. A headline appeared on the screen. Local farmer attracts major corporate interest with breakthrough technology. The article included a photo. Jessica's smile disappeared. Caleb, she opened the article. Read every word. Then read it again. No, impossible. Her father noticed. What is it? Jessica turned the screen toward him. Richard Reed glanced at it, then shrugged. So that's Caleb Turner. Who? The farm boy. Richard laughed. Looks like he got lucky. Jessica smiled. Exactly. Neither of them realized that luck had absolutely nothing to do with what was coming next. And neither of them knew that while Caleb's future was about to change forever, the Reed family's empire was quietly beginning to collapse. The following morning, Caleb woke up to 12 missed calls. By noon, that number had doubled. By evening, reporters were parked outside the farm. Everything was happening too fast. Just 3 days earlier, people had laughed at him. Now people wanted interviews, partnerships, meetings, photos. His inbox looked like chaos. Yet the message that mattered most came shortly after lunch. Daniel Brooks called again. His tone sounded different this time. More serious. More excited. Are you sitting down? Caleb laughed nervously. Should I be? Probably. Caleb pulled out a chair. Daniel didn't waste time. The board reviewed your technology. Caleb's heartbeat quickened. And there was a brief pause. Then Daniel said the words that changed everything. They want to invest. Caleb froze. What? They want exclusive rights to manufacture your system nationwide. Silence. Complete silence. Caleb honestly thought he had heard wrong. Daniel continued. The initial offer is $8 million. The world stopped. $8 million. Not 8,000. Not 80,000. $8 million. Caleb sat motionless. His hands trembled. Daniel chuckled. You still there? Caleb struggled to speak. $8 million. That's the opening offer. Caleb covered his face. For years, he had worried about losing the farm. Now someone was offering enough money to save it 10 times over. Daniel's voice softened. You earned this, Caleb. After the call ended, Caleb remained seated. The number kept repeating in his head. 8 million. 8 million. 8 million. His mother found him 20 minutes later. What's wrong? Caleb looked up. Tears filled his eyes. For a second she panicked. Then he smiled, and she immediately understood. Caleb. He nodded. Her hand flew to her mouth. No. He nodded again. This time she began crying too. The two of them hugged in the middle of the kitchen. Neither cared how ridiculous they looked. For years they had carried fear. Fear of debt. Fear of failure. Fear of losing everything. Now that weight was finally lifting. Meanwhile, Across town, trouble was quietly brewing inside Reed Agricultural Holdings. Richard Reed sat at the head of a boardroom table surrounded by nervous executives. Nobody looked comfortable. A projector displayed numbers on a giant screen. The numbers were ugly. Very ugly. Richard slammed a folder onto the table. "Explain this." The chief financial officer cleared his throat. "The overseas expansion isn't performing as expected." Richard glared at him. "As expected?" The man swallowed. "We've lost approximately $140 million. The room fell silent. Richard's face darkened. "How?" "The market collapsed." Richard stood up. "Then fix it." "We're trying." "No." Richard pointed aggressively. "Don't tell me you're trying." Nobody responded, because everybody knew the truth. The damage had already been done. That evening, Richard walked into his mansion looking exhausted. Jessica noticed immediately. "You okay?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." Richard loosened his tie. "I said I'm fine." Jessica frowned. Her father rarely lost his temper. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The next few days became a nightmare. Investors began withdrawing. Banks started asking questions. Share prices fell. News outlets picked up the story. Then things got worse. Much worse. One morning, Richard received a phone call that left him staring silently at his desk. Jessica entered his office later that afternoon. He looked 10 years older. "Dad." No response. "Dad." Richard finally looked up. His eyes were filled with something Jessica had never seen before. Fear. Her stomach tightened. "What happened?" Richard exhaled slowly. "The bank refused." "What bank?" "The restructuring loan." Jessica didn't understand. "So?" Richard rubbed his forehead. "So, if we don't secure funding." He stopped. Jessica felt cold. "If we don't secure funding, what?" Richard finally said it. "We could lose the company." The words hit like a truck. Jessica laughed nervously. "No." Richard remained silent. The smile disappeared from her face. "No." Again, silence. For the first time in her life, Jessica realized something terrifying. Money wasn't permanent. Success wasn't guaranteed. Even powerful people could fall. The following day, local television stations interrupted regular programming with breaking news. A major announcement was being made. Caleb Turner stood behind a podium. Reporters packed the room. Cameras flashed nonstop. Daniel Brooks stood beside him. The company officially unveiled a multi-million-dollar partnership. Applause erupted. Questions flew from every direction. "Mr. Turner, how does it feel? What are your plans? How quickly will production begin?" Caleb answered calmly, but inside, he was still the same farm boy. The same young man who had spent countless nights fixing equipment under barn lights. The same young man people had ignored. The interview aired across the state. Jessica watched from her living room. She couldn't believe it. Everywhere she looked, there was Caleb. News websites, social media, television, radio. The guy she had publicly humiliated had become the town's biggest success story, and his rise wasn't slowing down. A week after the county fair, Caleb officially launched Turner Agricultural Solutions. The new headquarters occupied an impressive glass building downtown. Employees were hired. Departments were created. Operations expanded. The company grew almost overnight. People who once ignored Caleb suddenly wanted meetings. The same business owners who had dismissed him now called him Sir. The same investors who had walked past his booth now begged for opportunities. Life had completely changed. But Caleb never forgot where he came from. One afternoon, while touring the new office, he stopped to speak with a janitor. The man looked surprised. Most executives walked past without noticing him. Caleb shook his hand, asked about his family, thanked him for his work. The janitor later told everyone the same thing. He's still the same person. And that was exactly why people respected him. Back at Reed Agricultural Holdings, respect was becoming difficult to find. Employees whispered in hallways. Rumors spread. Meetings grew tense. Several major clients terminated contracts. Then came the worst day of all. Richard gathered his executive team. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The numbers on the screen said everything. The company was running out of options. One executive finally broke the silence. There may be one solution. Richard looked up. What? The executive hesitated, then answered carefully. Turner Agricultural Solutions. The room became still. Richard frowned. What? They have the capital. Nobody spoke. They have the technology. Still silence. They have investor confidence. Richard stared at the table. The irony was almost unbearable. A week ago, Caleb Turner had been irrelevant. Now he possessed something Richard desperately needed. A future. That night, Richard sat with Jessica in the mansion's library. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Jessica asked the question she feared most. What happens if we can't save the company? Richard looked away. Thousands of employees depended on Reed Agricultural Holdings. Families, communities, entire towns. His answer came quietly. We lose everything. Jessica felt her throat tighten. And Turner? Richard nodded slowly. He's the only one who can help. Jessica immediately remembered the county fair. The laughter, the insults, the crowd, the look in Caleb's eyes before he walked away. Shame flooded through her. Richard noticed. You know him, don't you? Jessica swallowed. A little. Richard studied her expression. Then his eyes narrowed. What happened between you two? Jessica couldn't answer, because deep down she already knew something terrible. If Caleb decided to say no, their future would disappear. And for the first time in her life, Jessica Reed was about to discover what it felt like to need mercy from someone she had never shown any. Jessica barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the county fair. She heard the laughter. Her laughter. She heard herself calling Caleb a nobody, a loser, a farm boy who would never amount to anything. At the time, it had felt harmless. Just another joke. Just another moment of showing everyone where she stood in the social hierarchy. Now those words felt like stones tied around her neck. The next morning, she walked downstairs and found her father sitting alone at the dining table. A stack of documents sat in front of him. His coffee had gone cold. Dad. Richard looked up. Jessica immediately noticed the exhaustion in his eyes. He looked defeated. A man who had spent decades building an empire now seemed powerless. We received another notice. Jessica's stomach dropped. What kind of notice? 3 major lenders want immediate repayment. Silence. Can they do that? They can. What happens if they don't get it? Richard exhaled heavily. We begin losing assets. Jessica sat down slowly. Everything suddenly felt real. This wasn't a temporary setback. This wasn't a problem money could magically solve. This was a collapse. Richard looked at her. I need you to do something. Jessica already knew what was coming. No. Jessica, no. We don't have a choice. Jessica looked away. Her father continued. I've tried reaching him. She turned back. What happened? He refuses to discuss anything until he reviews our proposal. Jessica frowned. That sounds reasonable. It is. Richard leaned forward. But I need someone who knows him. Jessica almost laughed. Knew him? Richard ignored the correction. Go speak with him. The words landed hard. She stared at her father. You want me to ask Caleb Turner for help? I want you to help save this company. Jessica's eyes filled with emotion. For the first time, she understood what desperation felt like. Not for herself. For thousands of people. Employees. Families. People who depended on the company. If Reed Agricultural Holdings failed, many innocent people would suffer. And Kayla was the only person standing between survival and disaster. Hours later, Jessica sat inside her car across from Turner Agricultural Solutions. The glass headquarters towered above the street. Employees entered and exited the building confidently. Several luxury vehicles sat parked outside. News crews occasionally appeared near the entrance. Everything about the place screamed success. Jessica gripped the steering wheel. This couldn't be real. 1 week. 1 single week. 7 days earlier, Caleb had stood behind a folding table while people laughed at him. Now he owned one of the fastest growing companies in the industry. She sat there for nearly 15 minutes, unable to move, unable to gather the courage. Eventually her phone buzzed. It was her father. "Are you there?" "Yes." "Then go inside." Jessica closed her eyes, then ended the call. Slowly, she stepped out of the car. Every step toward the entrance felt heavier than the last. The receptionist greeted her politely. "Good afternoon." Jessica forced a smile. "Hi. How may I help you?" Jessica swallowed. "I need to see Kayla Turner." The receptionist checked her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. I'm sorry, but it's important." The receptionist hesitated. Jessica lowered her voice. "Please." Something in her expression must have worked. The receptionist finally nodded. "I'll see if he's available." Several minutes passed. Jessica sat in silence. Her hands trembled. She hated how nervous she felt. Then the receptionist stood. "Mr. Turner will see you." Jessica's heart pounded. She followed an assistant through a hallway lined with glass offices. Employees moved with purpose. Meetings were taking place everywhere. People were busy building something important. Finally, they reached a large office. The assistant opened the door. "Right this way." Jessica stepped inside, then froze. Caleb stood near the window, reviewing documents. He looked up. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched. Jessica barely recognized him. Not because he looked different, because he carried himself differently. Confident, focused, certain. The uncertainty she had once mocked was gone. "Jessica," his voice remained calm. She nodded. "Hi." Caleb gestured toward a chair. "Have a seat." She sat. He returned to his desk. Neither seemed eager to begin. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "What can I do for you?" Jessica looked down. Every prepared speech vanished. Every excuse disappeared. Only the truth remained. She took a deep breath. "I came to apologize." Caleb studied her, but said nothing. Jessica continued. "I was cruel." Still silence. "I judged you." Caleb remained expressionless. "I laughed at you." Her voice cracked slightly. "And you didn't deserve it." The room became quiet. Jessica looked away. The silence felt unbearable. Finally, Caleb spoke. "Why now?" The question hit hard. "Because it was fair. Completely fair." Jessica swallowed. "Because I was wrong." Caleb leaned back. "That's all." Jessica hesitated, then shook her head. "No." Caleb waited. She forced herself to continue. "My father's company is in trouble." There it was. The truth. Raw and unavoidable. Caleb nodded slowly. "I know." Jessica wasn't surprised. Everyone knew. The news had spread everywhere. She stared at her hands. "We need help." Caleb remained silent. "We may lose everything." Still nothing. "We've run out of options." For several seconds, Caleb simply watched her. Then he asked a question. A simple question. One that cut deeper than any accusation ever could. "If our positions were reversed..." Jessica looked up. "Would you help me?" The word struck like lightning. Because she already knew the answer. She could have lied. She could have pretended. She could have said yes. But something inside her wouldn't allow it. Not anymore. Tears formed in her eyes. Slowly, she shook her head. "No." The room fell silent. Jessica looked down. Ashamed. Humiliated. Honest. "No," she repeated quietly. "I probably wouldn't." Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. Not a mocking smile. Not a victorious smile. A genuine one. Jessica looked confused. "You know what's interesting?" She wiped her eyes. "What?" "That's the first honest thing you've ever said to me." The tension in the room eased slightly. Caleb stood and walked toward the window. The city stretched below. For a moment he said nothing. Then he spoke softly. "You know what hurt most that day?" Jessica braced herself. "The insults." Caleb shook his head. The fact that everyone believed them. Jessica couldn't respond, because she remembered. The crowd, the laughter, the way people had instantly assumed she was right, because she was rich. Caleb turned back toward her. "My father taught me something before he died." Jessica listened carefully. He said success reveals character. He paused. Failure reveals it too. Jessica lowered her eyes. The words hit harder than any lecture, because she was living that reality. Caleb returned to his desk. Then he opened a folder. Inside were documents related to Reed Agricultural Holdings. Jessica looked surprised. You already reviewed us? Caleb nodded. For 3 days. Hope flickered inside her. Small, fragile, but real. Caleb folded his hands. Your company made mistakes. Jessica nodded. I know. Serious mistakes. I know. But thousands of employees aren't responsible for those mistakes. Jessica looked at him, unsure where this was going. Caleb continued. And neither are the farmers who depend on those contracts. Her heartbeat accelerated. Caleb, he raised a hand gently. Let me finish. Jessica fell silent. The next words would determine everything. Their future, their company, perhaps even their lives. And for the first time since entering the building, she realized something extraordinary. The poor farm boy she once mocked wasn't deciding whether to get revenge. He was deciding what kind of man he wanted to be. And that decision was about to change both of their futures forever. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. What would you have done in Caleb's position? Help Jessica or walk away? Let us know in the comments. The answer Caleb gave next would surprise everyone. Caleb looked directly at Jessica. The room was silent. No interruptions. No distractions. Just two people sitting across from each other, separated by 7 days that had completely changed their lives. Finally, Caleb spoke. I'm willing to help. Jessica froze. For a moment, she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. What? I'm willing to help. The words echoed inside her mind. She stared at him in disbelief. After everything she had done, after every insult, after humiliating him in front of an entire crowd, he was still willing to help. Why? Caleb smiled slightly. Because this isn't about revenge. Jessica felt tears gathering again. But I don't deserve it. No. The answer came quickly. Honest. Direct. Surprisingly gentle. No, you don't. Jessica lowered her head. Caleb continued. But the employees deserve it. He opened the folder. The farmers deserve it. Another page turned. The families, depending on those paychecks, deserve it. Jessica listened quietly. And I'm not going to punish innocent people because of my pride. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. She had expected anger. She had expected rejection. She had expected humiliation. What she got instead was grace. And somehow, that felt even more powerful. Caleb slid several documents across the desk. There will be conditions. Jessica immediately nodded. Anything. Read them first. She picked up the papers. The first condition made her blink. Employee protection. No layoff for a minimum of 3 years. The second condition focused on local farmers. Guaranteed fair contracts. Transparent pricing. Protection against exploitative agreements. The third condition surprised her most. Community investment programs. Scholarships. Agricultural training. Support for struggling families. Jessica looked up. These are your demands? Caleb nodded. She flipped through the pages again. There was nothing selfish. Nothing vindictive. Nothing designed to embarrass her family. Everything focused on helping others. You could have asked for anything. Caleb shrugged. I already have enough. The simplicity of the answer left her speechless. For years, she had believed success meant accumulating more. More money. More power. More status. Yet the man sitting across from her viewed success completely differently. He viewed it as responsibility. Jessica slowly stood. Thank you. Caleb nodded. I hope you've learned something from all this. She laughed weakly through her tears. I've learned a lot. For the first time, they shared a genuine smile. Not as enemies. Not as rivals. Simply as two people who had changed. The agreement moved quickly. Within days, news broke across the country. Turner Agricultural Solutions had entered a strategic partnership with Reed Agricultural Holdings. Business analysts called it one of the most surprising deals of the year. Financial experts praised Caleb's leadership. Industry leaders praised his vision. But the public never learned the most important part of the story. They never learned what happened inside that office. They never learned how close revenge had come. And they never learned how one decision had changed everything. The following months brought dramatic improvements. The partnership stabilized the company. Jobs were protected. Investors regained confidence. Operations recovered. Employees who had feared unemployment returned to work with renewed hope. Entire communities benefited. For Richard Reed, the experience was humbling, very humbling. The first time he met Caleb after the agreement, he extended his hand. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Caleb shook it firmly. "You owe your employees." Richard nodded. "I won't forget that." And surprisingly, he didn't. The crisis changed him. The arrogance that had accompanied decades of success slowly disappeared. He became more involved with employees, more attentive to farmers, more willing to listen. Failure had taught him lessons success never could. But perhaps nobody changed more than Jessica. Several weeks after the partnership was finalized, she drove back to the county fairgrounds. The event had long ended. The booths were gone. The crowds had disappeared. The place sat quiet. She walked slowly to the exact spot where Caleb's display had stood. The memory hit immediately. The laughter, the mocking, the cruelty. For a long time, she stood there alone. Then she took out her phone. Not to make a call, not to send a message, just to record a video, a personal reminder, a promise. She looked directly into the camera. "A year ago, I thought money made people important." Her voice remained steady. "I thought success gave me the right to look down on others." She paused. "I was wrong." The video lasted only 2 minutes, but she kept it. Whenever pride started creeping back into her life, she watched it again. Months later, one of Caleb's community scholarship programs held its first award ceremony. Dozens of students attended. Parents filled the room. Many of the recipients came from struggling farming families. Families just like Caleb's. As the ceremony began, one young student approached Caleb nervously. "Mr. Turner?" Caleb smiled. "Yes." The teenager held up a scholarship letter. "I got accepted. Congratulations." The boy's eyes filled with excitement. "My dad said I should thank you." Caleb shook his head. "Thank your hard work." The student smiled, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did you become successful?" The room seemed to grow quieter. Several nearby students listened carefully. They wanted the answer too. Caleb thought for a moment, then smiled. "The same way anybody does." The students waited. "Keep working when nobody believes in you." Silence. "Keep improving when nobody notices." More silence. "And never let someone else's opinion become your future." The words landed deeply, especially for Jessica, because she happened to be sitting in the audience. She watched him from the back of the room, and for the first time, she truly understood the greatest victory wasn't becoming rich. It wasn't building a company. It wasn't earning headlines. The greatest victory was refusing to become bitter. Most people, after experiencing humiliation, would have chosen revenge. Caleb chose purpose. Most people would have chosen pride. Caleb chose character. And that choice changed hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. As the event ended, students surrounded Caleb. Parents thanked him. Families celebrated. The atmosphere felt hopeful, optimistic, bright. Jessica approached him afterward. "Nice speech." Caleb laughed. "I wasn't trying to give one." "Still," she smiled. "It was good." They walked together toward the exit. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jessica looked at him. "You know something?" "What?" "If that day at the fair never happened." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I probably never would have changed." Caleb smiled. "Maybe." Jessica laughed. "No, definitely." They reached the parking lot. Then she stopped. "Caleb?" "Yeah." "Thank you." This time she wasn't thanking him for saving the company, or helping her family, or protecting jobs. She was thanking him for showing her a different way to live. Caleb understood immediately. He nodded, then climbed into his truck. The same truck he had owned before the success, before the headlines. before the millions. Because some things never needed changing. As he drove away, Jessica watched until the vehicle disappeared down the road. Then she smiled. The rich girl who once believed money determined a person's worth had learned the truth the hard way. Character mattered more. Humility mattered more. Kindness mattered more. And the poor farm boy she once humiliated had become the man who owned her future. Not because he had power over her, but because he had shown her a better path forward. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. And tell us in the comments, do you think Caleb made the right choice by helping Jessica, or should he have walked away?